Look, it's better to win ugly than it is to lose ugly. A victory Monday always feels better than a loss Monday, so things are okay. But, when you take a look at that game in the context of both the 2023 Chiefs and Patriots and the greater understanding of what this Chiefs team has been under Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, that game may have been, technically speaking, kind of weird.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Chiefs victorious over the New England Patriots, keeping them from a 3-game losing streak, which would have really been a heck of a sky is falling type of moment. And Skyy Moore has fallen off the active roster to injured reserve. We'll talk about both of those things at the top here on this edition of Only Weird Games. Joshua Brisco and Seth Keysor with you today as Nate Taylor is on his way back from New England shortly after being absolutely flame-broiled by Andy Reid on the Zoom presser because Nate had the audacity to ask Andy Reid a question in the Zoom from his hotel in Foxborough, I presume. I haven't actually seen the background, but I know that Nate at the time was still in New England. And so he asks a question. Andy answers it and says something along the lines of, doggone it, Nate, didn't your mother ever teach you to make your bed? Like, what? Well, and unfortunately, I know that the listeners, viewers, commenters, etc., will be devastated that Nate is not here with us right now. It's because I believe he is literally on a plane right this second. He would do a show from an airport when he can.
He's actually going around every single room in that hotel and the adjacent hotels and making the beds. He's just like, never again. Never again.
I wish in retro, and I'm sure Nate now wishes he had a response ready to go, but I can't blame him. I don't know what I would have said in that moment. I wasn't expecting it either. I wish he would have said, oh no, coach, yeah, my mom taught me how to make the bed. My dad taught me why I pay room service. And I'm just gonna, enjoy that luxury while on the road. But not the case. We'll get Nate's side of that more on Thursday. Seth,
do people make the bed at hotels? Like, am I being inconsiderate? Because here's the deal.
All right, we're gonna talk about Skyy Moore in just a second here. Go ahead.
Okay, Come on, man.
We were so close to starting the show on a real topic, but it's okay.
You can't make me laugh this early. Please don't do that.
I wasn't trying to.
So I just didn't. I mean, they clean the bedding regardless. So if you're making the bed, all you're doing is just locking in the sheets that you slept in that they're going to have to pull. What I always do, we pull off the covers and we put the sheets in a pile and the comforter in a pile. And I was assumed that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I would. What I was going to ask, but I decided not to because I thought it was going to make the start of the show too hectic, is are you a bed maker day to day? Are you an at-home make your bed type of guy?
So no, and we're a bed arranger type of guy. There's two things. One, I've got like 8 pillows at this point in my life. I'm like not like throw pillows, like actual functional pillows. I got like 2 for my head, like 3 to put between my legs to like keep my back from going out. Another one to grab onto for the nights Jazz is like leave me alone, and like
most nights, weeknights.
And so I've got a zillion pillows. Jazz has a zillion pillows, and they really all are functional. And we also, and this is a pro marriage move here, Josh.
Yeah, let me hold on, take some notes.
Here's the deal. 2 comforters. Each of you gets a comforter, a gigantic comforter. You will be happier and healthier just having the option. You don't have to use it every night. Sometimes it's like, hey, baby, it's cold outside. Let's snuggle up. And some nights it's like, good Lord, I'm exhausted. I'm going to just snuggle in this gigantic comforter while you do it too. And yes, seriously, guys, beds and pillows, you had to be here for the beginning. If Andy Reid is going to talk about it during his press conference, my goodness, we can talk about it here on Only Weird Games.
I have not. Here's where I'm at right now. So first of all, I've never been a bed maker. I'd like to be. Given the choice from if I could magic wand, boom, bed's made, I'd take it. That would be ideal. But again, who's got the time? What we have figured out, and I have not actually brought it back up for this winter for reasons I'll explain. Not only have we unlocked the, how you don't fight about sheets and blankets, you each get your own sort of phenomenon. A great pro tip that I'm really happy to hear you share with the masses. Double comforter, great play.
Oh,
double weighted blanket, game changer. Game
Just
changer.
womp.
The problem, and honest to goodness, and I don't know what this says about my personality, diagnose me in the comments, is that I have not...
Oh, that's such a bad idea, man. Cool. Please don't diaggnose me in the comments. I'm just
diagnose us
say
both
it.
in the comments, and Tucker will
note
put his
that his
favorite
mom is here.
diagnoses. Yeah, my mom is here, and Renee's not watching, but my mom is. So my mom might give a diagnosis in the comments if she's watching. I have not brought my weighted blanket back onto the bed yet because it makes me too comfortable. And I already have a hard enough time getting up in the morning, and like, you know, I don't, whatever the you know, the Folgers commercials where you just like wake up and the sun comes through the windows and you just, birds are chirping and you float
Those
out
people
to your
are
coffee
serial
cup.
killers.
God,
They
I mean,
are-
like, I don't trust morning people. I'm happy for you. And if you get up early, but you're still grumpy in the morning, I trust you again. But if you wake up in a good mood, I assume that you've got some dark passenger that's really causing all of this. So, weighted blanket, full endorsement, double comforter, full endorsement. We have now fixed your betting game, which means we should talk about Skyy more, which we'll do. Actually, hey, Tucker, you let me know. Do we need to take one of these little itty-bitty breaks early on, or should we just power through? I usually ask before the show, and I didn't today, but it would be a very convenient time. We don't need a break. We don't need a break, Seth. We're playing tempo. We're powering through because
I blame
Skyy
the coaching for that, by the way.
It is, you know, the coaching, the execution. We could all be better. I could be better. I got to put you in positions to succeed. Richie James only played 2 snaps. That can't happen. I got to figure out whose fault that is. So anyway, the news of just the last hour or so is that Skyy Moore has been placed on injured reserve, ending certainly his regular season. The quickness of all of that makes me wonder if the Chiefs have found something more serious there. Post game last night was not a sense of urgency from Andy Reid. He said something, you know, about getting a little banged up or whatever.
Right.
But ultimately, he's placed on injured reserve, out for the rest of the regular season, and ends his sophomore campaign. Yeah, after the game, Andy Reid said his knee swelled up on him. That's a lot of things happen in a knee, but maybe there was a more severe injury that he was out there fighting through, and then the swelling is what they noticed by post-game, and we'll probably get a better idea on Wednesday when Andy Reid talks. Actually, Reid won't talk till Thursday this week because it's on a Monday, so we may not get any more information from the Chiefs on that until Thursday. We'll see if anyone else reports any info as we go, but Skyy Moore out for the remainder of the regular season, and theoretically, I guess, a wild card game. We'll see. I would assume his sophomore campaign is over. First, Seth, before we get into the impact of that and more, we will get more into Chiefs Patriots as we go here, but since this is breaking, where does this put you in terms of wrapping up, again, what I think can only be described as a disappointing second year for Skyy Moore?
You know what? I'm going to talk about all that while you go ahead and look at the public comments for a little bit. So the thing that's worth noting as the thing that's worth noting.
Screenshot the funny ones and text me later.
My
mom says early morning grumpiness. That's genetic. So that's good. Thank you, Mom.
No, I was referring to the incredibly accurate diagnosis right above it. We call him God Complex Brisco. Anyway,
that's good. So, that's all, you can just read them if I just did see the Tucker said diagnose Josh in the comments now. Man, so many of my greatest hosting moments, my setups and my knockdowns and my segues and everything all die in a vat of Seth reading the public comments.
That's probably fair. Anyway, so one thing that's worth noting for Chiefs fans that are trying to kind of figure out where things might change on the offense with Moore being out, it's got to be noted that after playing almost 66% of the snaps against Green Bay, and then the week before that, he played like 57% of the snaps against Las Vegas, played 50% against Philly, only 25% against Miami, but there was a lot going into that in terms of personnel and formations. Overall, Moore was playing like 55-ish% of the snaps on the season. Last 2 weeks, 35% and 25%. And I think that trend was going to continue. So I don't know. It's not as big a change as it would have been, 4 weeks ago or something like that. You were already seeing the Chiefs kind of, one could say, reading the writing on the wall. But that's usually something like, beforehand. In this case, it wasn't really the writing on the wall so much as the entire wall had been painted and then wallpaper. And then they put another layer of sheetrock on there for some reason, which is weird, but it's what they did. Maybe a whole line of insulation. And so that's just how his season's gone. Really tough sophomore season for Skyy Moore. It's kind of interesting. They tend to not give up on guys, especially, early draft picks. I'm curious what the offseason looks like for him. If there's some team out there that's like, hey, they want to pull a Brett Veach and say, hey, we'll give you a sixth for this guy that's not working out where you are, or where he is. Maybe they do that. I have no idea. I hope he recovers. I hope he bounces back strong next year. But things were not going well. And we've talked about that for a myriad of reasons. But they were already starting to replace his snaps. And I know a lot of people, I think, based on like comments that I've seen online, et cetera, is that a lot of people are thinking, well, Rashee Rice was taking all of Skyy Moore snaps. That's not quite accurate because they were playing more on the boundary a fair amount of the time. Sorry, Jordan, just
put it on the screen or read it or something.
Jordan
wow,
Foot
Jordan
just gave a $2 super chat for a Josh haircut fund. Dang it. Okay, I'm switching to the private chat.
I shaved this weekend. I feel like my lettuce is actually flowing. I looked at the comments, and Seth, all I saw was one comment that said I had a God complex and one comment that said my jacket was great. So I don't see the problem here.
Yeah, you do have a great jacket, by the way.
Thank you.
Is a nice looking jacket.
That's all.
Although our fashion compliments from me, that's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really a jacket, it's a shirt jacket. You kind of go either way, but I digress. You alluded to before you were enraptured by hilarity. Thank you, Jordan, for spending $2 to derail the show. Most people can do it for free, honestly. Like Ronaldo McDonaldo, who says, let's start a GoFundMe for chat blinders for Seth. That, I got $2 for that one. That's a great idea.
I could put this over the one side of my screen.
I will just
look at it.
I will overnight ship to you just like some duct tape or something just to put over that side of your screen. That's
a judge is going to get mad at me during some hearing. Be like, Mr. Keysor, could you inquire as to credit for time served? Like, Judge, I don't know. It's on the right side of my screen and I can't see that. You want to explain that, Mr. Keysor? I'd rather not, Your Honor. Frankly, I can't explain that, Judge. Not in any way that won't lead to me serving a couple days for contempt. But
can you serve days for contempt?
Oh yeah, if you're found in contempt of court, so there's direct contempt. And so direct contempt is if you do something like crazy in court, or you directly are found in contempt of court. I think in Minnesota you can do 180 days for contempt.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. Looking at the comments, I think about half our people would like to send you in for about a month, but just kind of being in contempt of the show. But I don't think I have that kind of power. Mentioning Skyy Moore going forward, I actually really haven't been on Twitter since this news came down, so I don't know if this is something that has popped up, but I kind of assume there are some people that are like, okay, well, we've seen the last of Skyy Moore in Kansas City, or at least people who are saying we should have now seen the last of Skyy Moore in Kansas City. For me, this goes back to where I'm at with the receiver group as a whole in terms of how the Chiefs are evaluating them. We will not get an honest evaluation of the Chiefs wide receivers from the Chiefs until the offseason. That's when we will know what they actually think. Andy Reid has said at the podium, MVS needs more work, and then his workload went down for 2 weeks, and then they'll cut him this offseason, and we'll know what the Chiefs thought of MVS, right? Like, some of that will show up. Again, not writing on the wall, but those walls being knocked down, Miley Cyrus style. So, with Skyy Moore, he does feel like a candidate where if he was on another team, like, oh, there's a small school receiver who didn't really develop, but we really liked him coming out of the draft. We had a late second, early third round grade on him, and he just didn't work out. And let's just say, to pick a random team, like with the Giants. And so we're going to go ahead and trade like a 5th or a 6th rounder to try to get year 3 and 4 of his rookie deal and see what's there. That's the type of move that I feel like the Chiefs would make to bring in a receiver. And obviously they did it with Kadarius Toney. I also, if the Chiefs have any feel whatsoever that Skyy Moore is still in part a year behind based off small school, the arc of his NFL career, what he hasn't quite picked up on, if they are buying at all into him having unrealized potential, I would hate for them to trade him for a 6th round pick. And really what I'm expecting right now is that he will be just a guy in the offseason, just a guy you throw into the depth chart the Chiefs will also treat him like that instead of treating him like a potential number one receiver like they did this last offseason. And then he'll be there through training camp. We'll get a feel of where he is in the rotation at training camp. And then either he'll be wide receiver 4 or 5, or he'll be a cut down day trade or a surprise cut after 2 years. But cutting a second round pick after 2 seasons is a pretty tough thing to do. And
Right.
I don't completely get the feel that the Chiefs are there on Skyy Moore, in part because of the hope they had for him coming into this season. Like if they buy into him as, and this is super silly, like this is intangible stuff, which we're talking about from the other side with Kadarius Toney. But if the Chiefs spend an offseason saying like, yeah, we think this kid can handle the pressure and he can take another step and we like how he's wired and his football character and all of those things, he's still fast and still has big hands. Like, that's theoretically all the stuff that you were betting on originally. So I'll be fascinated to see what happens over the course of the offseason with him. But I certainly do think the Chiefs will not be marching him around, or Toney for that matter. I don't think we'll see the same argument for who number one is going to be in that receiving room.
That would be absolutely shocking. And if they went that route, I actually had an interesting conversation with someone today. Well, it wasn't exactly a conversation. It was a Twitter beef, I think. I don't know. That I muted that dude a while ago, and he's been screaming into the void for a minute based on the number of "you have this party muted" in my replies, which I feel bad about, but he wasn't being very nice.
Tucker, next time just text him.
So the thing with the thing with what they did, I think we can all agree that arguably, other than that very first draft, which was abysmal, the biggest, I think, whiff, like solid position group sized whiff, pure whiff of Brett Veach's career as the GM for the Chiefs is this year's wide receiver room, right?
Yeah.
Counting on, especially, most specifically, a second round pick in Skyy Moore so far, and a third rounder and change for Kadarius Toney so far, and looking like it might end up that way. So I think we can all agree on that. There's other things, you can argue, was Frank Clark worth that price and that contract? No. But he did some good things. Same with Sammy Watkins. Was it worth what they get? No, but he did some good things. Orlando Brown. Nah, not ultimately, but you got cost-controlled left tackle play for a couple of years and then some compensatory pick stuff for a late first rounder. I call that a push, honestly. So all that's a long road to a short thought of saying they whiffed on the wide receiver room this year. They invested some guys. They really thought that between Toney or Moore, they thought one of them could be Juju this year. Yep. I think that's what they genuinely thought, and they were just wrong. Okay, fair enough. You took a couple shots, kind of maybe both of them were long shots to an extent, but you can see the physical talent. So here's what I'm getting at with Skyy Moore and honestly, Kadarius Toney. Look, Kadarius Toney's under contract next year for a $2.5 million cap hit.
Yep.
Skyy Moore's under contract next year for a $1.7 million cap hit. These are not big cap hits. And you got to remember, it's like, oh, well, $2.5 million. There's maybe a little more of an argument there with Toney because it's a bigger cap hit and where you can get like a fringe guy in terms of like, special teamer and, and you end up with like $1.5 million in savings. But Toney is also, and this is crazy to believe I can't believe he did it again. I can't believe he did it again. There's just nothing more to say. That's like, how did that? I can't remember seeing that happen.
You and Patrick Mahomes cannot believe he did it again.
Patrick, that man, he was upset. And I get it. Like, we need a professional lip reader because I've had so many people tell me with total confidence exactly what he said on the sideline, and it's all very different things. And if we've learned one thing from those bad lip reading videos, if someone tells you what it is, you're going to transpose that onto their lips. And like, oh, that's exactly what he's saying. So my point is, it would be surprising to me, depending on what they do with the wide receiver room next year, if Skyy Moore and Kadarius Toney aren't both here, just in a wildly different role. And that's the problem with Moore and Toney. It's not that they don't belong on an NFL roster. There's arguments to be made, perhaps. It's that they have been Peter principled to death this year in terms of being placed in a position they clearly can't handle. It's great to see like Travis Kelce walking with his arm around Toney after the game. I know a lot of people are like, oh no, they need to be on them. They need to be yelling at them. I'm gonna propose something here. And this is based on my conversations with players, only 2 or 3 guys that I've talked to about this. The NFL is different than high school ball and college ball. Hollering at a grown man, if he doesn't care enough to try, hollering at him's not going to do it. That works with kids. It really does. They need to be, hey, get after it. And there are some people who genuinely maybe need to have someone to light a fire under them. That's what Eric Bieniemy was great at. Accountability before I'm not even going to look at the comments.
Before you put the duct tape back over the right side of your screen.
Accountability matters. Absolutely. I would say if you can hold people accountable without screaming at them. You can. Some people do it some way, some people do it another way.
Andy Reid has explicitly been doing it for decades.
Yes. Yes. And the reality of the situation is Kadarius Toney either cares enough to really work on this stuff or he doesn't. And we'll see. But both of them are probably going to be on the roster next year simply because they're cheap and there is some scratching of talent to try to do with it. Kadarius Toney is incredible with the ball in his hands. Honestly, this whole idea, use him as in the backfield and as a gadget guy, that sounds great to me because once he's got the ball in his hands, he morphs into a borderline like all pro level player. It's just everything before that. And those things matter if you're going to ask a guy to be a wide receiver 1. And so I understand what people are saying. Like they want to see people cut. They want to see, and I do wonder if their wide receiver room situation were different this year, if you would see something extreme, but extreme reactions have never been Andy Reid's thing. Not for 20 years in the league. He is not a guy that's going to cut a player for a bad performance or 2 bad performances or 5 bad performances. Now, MVS, on the other hand, I literally every time, and look, I wish the best for MVS. We'll always have the AFC Championship game. I don't know if they win the Super Bowl without his contributions last year, but he's taken a nosedive this year. I think in his most honest moments, he would agree with that. Don't you dare, Josh. Or he, yeah.
Of that. I have no evidence of that.
But he, on the other hand, if you look at 2024, it is a significant, there's just,
you said like $10 million or something.
Yeah, it's a large amount of money. Like right now, he's one of like the higher, he is a $14 million cap hit next year. You save 12 of that by cutting him. That's not even a hard decision. I mean, that's why they're so differently situated. And that's why those rookie contracts matter so much. Because let's say they just completely neuter, for lack of a better term, Kadarius Toney's snaps and say, you, sir, are only now we're going to get you 3 or 4 carries a game on some draw type stuff. We're going to get you a couple jet sweeps a game, a couple wide receivers things a game. You know what I mean? Hey, go out there and run a whip route. That's it. And then maybe as a punt returner, because if you're not using him fully in the offense, you might as well have him as a punt returner. Well, he treats every punt return like he's Isaiah Pacheco. And you know what? I respect it. That's the one thing. Like, don't tell me the guy doesn't care. That man, I have been like, dude, get out of bounds. Like, because that's gotta hurt. But anyway, you do all that, and he can do that decently or very well. That's worth $2.5 million. And that's why it's such a different analysis depending on what it costs, because it doesn't prevent you from bringing in 2 or 3 guys to become the 2, 3, 4, 5 guys behind Rashee Rice.
And neither one of us are saying, don't bring in competition in training camp. What we are saying is I've got 2 little strings to pull here. One, to your point, you cut MVS next year, you free up $12 million and get $2 million in dead cap money. There's not a single person watching this video right now who goes, whoa, that $2 million in dead cap doesn't sit right with me. But you might say, cut Skyy more to free up $100,000. His cap hit next year is $1.8 million if you're rounding up. Kadarius Toney's cap hit next year is $2.5 million if you're rounding a tiny bit down. That's the dead money you get when you cut MVS. So all of that to say, I think they'll be on the team next year. And for a pitch perfect example of that, may I introduce to you the Kansas City Chiefs hero of Week 15, guy that everyone wanted cut in training camp and earlier in the season and was a bad draft pick at the time, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's the MVP of this game, and I don't care to relitigate 2020 right now. People were telling me that I was dumb for telling you he had a role on this year's team, because you need someone who can do a lot of stuff if Pacheco gets hurt. You need a third running back to get a couple carries here and there. And if you can have a third running back who you trust both, like, knows the playbook, but on a bigger level understands the offense, the point of the offense, is a type of running back who will know that if he's in a spot of grass while Mahomes is making something happen in the red zone, he might just throw that 5'8"-ish guy, 5'7"-ish guy, a jump ball that he can go up and get. I don't know that Deneric Prince probably isn't there for that. You know what I mean? Like, that's no insult to Deneric Prince, but he just got here. So all of that to say, Clyde is a guy who's gone through that whole cycle of bad pick at the time, had some high moments, had some lower moments, hero of Chiefs Patriots, where he's like one of the only things reliably happening, and most of that's through the air, most of that's on a great, incredibly blocked play where he was riding Trey Smith's back with two other linemen flanking him.
That was also a good example of his physical limitations. Like, I don't know if that dude's that much faster than Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey, who moved really well for offensive linemen. That was an incredibly blocked play. That was
incredible.
They had nothing to do. It was so funny. Sorry, you were.
It was amazing. No, it was amazing. But point being, like, when you're talking about a 53-man roster, don't punish the failed wide receiver one or the failed running back one. Don't punish them so over the top that you are unwilling to see their value as running back 3 or wide receiver 5. If you took someone else's Skyy Moore, someone else's Kadarius Toney, and again, the Chiefs literally did take someone else's Kadarius Toney, you would be so excited about the reclamation project in a way less emphasized role on your team. So that's, for me, is kind of closing the book on Skyy Moore, and we got Kadarius Toney and that whole conversation out of the way pretty early on as well. So now we can talk about everything else happening in the game, and of course, leading it in to Rashee Rice. We've talked about receivers who are not as good as Rashee Rice, Seth, and once again, I don't have his box score up right. He was just south of 100 yards, 90-something on the day, I believe. 91, and of course, the touchdown pass from quarterback one, Jerick McKinnon. There's a lot of fun stuff in Rashee Rice's game here, Seth. Where do you start in terms of what was it that jumped off the page, or I guess off the screen for you today, as you wrote about in the Chief from the North newsletter?
I did. And the biggest thing to look at with Rice.
It's like 28. No, you're good.
Okay. You're not doing the thing. No. You're really not doing the thing.
Not doing the thing.
Okay. You're not doing the thing. So the thing that people get excited about, you can look at what he's done the last 4 weeks statistically. Man, my lack of trust right now is just like,
it's Mahomes.
Terrible.
Yeah.
This is terrible. So you can look at the stats for the last 4 weeks, and that's something that a lot of people can do. The last 4 games, 107 yards, 64 yards, 72 yards, 91 yards. His targets have gone way up, and he's maintained a fair amount of efficiency despite that, which kind of belies the idea that you can't get efficiency out of a guy that you're still utilizing in kind of a niche role, because they are. Like, I did not know you could target a guy 10 times within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. That's kind of incredible, honestly. But if I were to get excited about one play from Chiefs Patriots, similar to how I would get excited about like just one play against Buffalo, the back shoulder throw. This was the 3rd and 10 conversion in the second half of the game, in the third quarter, where it just really is about doing something different than what they've had him doing currently. Seeing him quickly create separation against man coverage, might be match. I'm pretty sure it's man coverage, with a really nice, no wasted steps, fake in, explode out, utilize. I'm watching the snap right now, utilizing his acceleration to create separation really quickly and really effectively, still drifting beyond the first down marker. Like, these are like, okay, this is another thing you can do. We weren't sure you can do. And that one, I guess you would describe it, it's not really a one cut fake, but that's, for lack of a better term, we're just going to butcher any kind of terminology here. Any wide receiver coaches who are in the comments, I'm sorry.
You can watch the clip in the newsletter and call it what you want.
Yeah. And so he sells the fake inside with not just his head, but with his entire body. He sells the fake, plants perfectly on that inside foot and explodes back outside, doesn't waste any steps, gets the separation, climbs upfield, catches a low ball. All of that, that's exactly what you want. If your question with a guy is, can he win against man coverage? Can he create separation on third down? And that's why I start off writing about him, because 3 different third downs, they converted with Rice. And those are plays. It's easy to forget about like a 3rd and 5 conversion that kept the drive going where they punted 3 minutes later. But it matters because had they punted right then, there would have been 7 minutes left in the game and the Patriots having 3 timeouts down 10. And you're suddenly like, hang on, is this a game again? Because Kadarius Toney handed the ball to the other team. I still can't believe that blew my mind. I don't want to go back down that route. So it is with Rice. That's why I'm so excited about that, because he did all the things we've seen him do before. Plus. And that's what's been nice to see. They keep unfolding one piece at a time, a little extra for him to do. Okay, well, let's try this. Let's see if you can create a little separation here, one-on-one on 3rd and 10. And he did. That's exciting to see because he's already shown he can be a capable contributor elsewhere and be an efficient guy, even with a bunch of shorter, kind of similar targets. Now that you expand what he can do, that's really exciting.
It's the most exciting thing because for how great his counting stats have been, and they're fabulous. I have just been kind of like not watching them through my fingers over my eyes. I'm not afraid, but it's just sort of I am afraid to be like, yeah, and it's easy to catch a lot of passes when all of your passes are horizontal. But seeing that blossom, I didn't like having that take because it seemed like I was like negging or doubting Rashee Rice, and that's not the point because we've seen him do stuff downfield, but just how the Chiefs have used him so far, this is an absolute thrill. Before we come back around to the good, I saw a comment pop by. Don't look at the comments; it's not worth it. But obviously, the fumbles up and down have been like ball control. We all just keep working on it. Keep tucking that thing. But there was a question about how he earned the penalty flag on what was ruled offensive pass interference, and how that's a young receiver mistake. Seth, could you explain what you saw on the offensive pass interference call against Rashee Rice, please?
That was really funny.
Let's take a break.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
I don't even have the comments open. I'm sorry for slandering our ball-knowing commenters for that. That was a lie, a total fabrication. I made it up. It wasn't OPI. Yeah. The safety came down and beheaded him because he was trying to get to Travis Kelce. I can answer that one for you.
That was well done. You got me to look away. You knew I'd be sitting there reading the comments. You knew I'd get distracted by a horse saying mean things about us. You just knew. You knew. And it's just, man, it's really tough having my I just wonder, you talk about how your dogs kind of take on your personality. I feel like I'm more and more taking on the personality of our dog, Kiko. She's a blue heeler, great dog. But she is very much like, if we're on a walk or a drive and there's a squirrel anywhere within whatever. And she doesn't just go chase it because she's a good dog. She listens. Mm-hmm. But I mean, she just and then just stares. And that's me if I start looking at the comments section. So well done. God dang it. Adam Sheehan with a great comment. Pump fake by Josh and Seth bit so hard. You would have been flagged by the NFL for pointing at me on your way into the end zone after that fake. The girl on fire 25. Only weird games is Josh's villain origin story. That was a couple weeks ago where I had him on the ropes.
And it continued for a while. I had a couple villain shows in a row, I feel like, but I think we're back. I didn't even feel great about that one, if I'm being honest, but I felt like I had to work harder for it than I wanted to. You were on your toes and you were signaling it early. You weren't gonna let it happen again. So here we are. Let me ask you this about Rashee Rice looking forward, and then we'll talk about other things from this game, not wide receiver related. But what is the role now? What's the realistic ceiling for him? Rashee Rice's floor is leading Chiefs wide receivers in targets and catches and catching passes that average 1 yard downfield. Like that's the floor for him, right? Like that'll be
Right.
in the game. Where do you think he goes from here as this receiver room has a lot of the same problems in week 15 that it had in week 1?
Right. Well, so when you're looking at floor and ceiling for a player, you don't want to just you can see floor a little better with production, and you can see ceiling with traits. And maybe even a better way of saying that, excuse me, you can figure out floor with usage, and traits get you to the ceiling, right? Because so right now we have certain usage. We know that he can get open against zone a little bit. We're not sure how consistently he can do it because the usage, right? But we know he can do it a little bit. We know he can create some separation on certain short physical routes like slants and the like by using physicality at the stem of the route. We know we can do that because we've seen him do it a little bit. We've seen that usage. We know we can do back shoulder throws a little bit. We've seen that usage. So there's a floor of a guy who is a really explosive yards after catch guy, who can be utilized in a variety of ways close to the line of scrimmage that way, and who can also do a little bit in terms of back shoulder and exploiting open zones. That's what we see right now with the usage. And that's where the floor is. So the floor is who he is right now, right? Assuming you can't, let's say he really, for one reason or another, and this often happens to players, he couldn't handle having his volume of bigger wide receiver stuff increased from where it's at right now. Okay. This is the limit. That's still a wide receiver. It's a valid wide receiver 2 on an offense.
Yep.
With a more limited skill set, but a valuable one. And because he's shown through usage the ability to do some of these things in small dosage, he's shown the ability to do enough things in a small dose that it's not just a niche player, right? That's the difference between a niche player and an actual like wide receiver 2. You got to be able to do more than just one thing. That's where we go back to Kadarius Toney. That's all pretty obvious. Yeah, he's a monster with the ball in his hands, but can you find the holes in zones? Doesn't seem like it. He hasn't shown the ability to really high point the ball or, catch the thing. And so,
line up
well, the easy
correctly.
ones. Yeah, he can't, line up correctly. So that's, you can get a niche guy like a McCole Hardman who can do 1 or 2 things well. If you can do 4 or 5 things well, right? 6 or 7 things well, all of that adds to it. So that, I think we're seeing the floor. Teams are going to continue, especially now we've got 4 weeks of film of him being targeted, I think at least 8 times every game. Yeah, last 4 games. So he hadn't had more than 5 targets in a game. Nope, he had 6 against the Chargers, I guess, way back in October. But his targets were, 5, 2, 5, and they were all very similar. The last 4 games, 10, 9, 10, and 9. That is wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 level of targets. It really is. And they've also expanded just a little bit every week. Okay, we're going to try a couple back shoulder throws. We're going to ask you to run a couple different routes here. They've expanded that role, which you have to do if you're going to target someone that many times. So if this is the floor, the ceiling, because of his physical skill set that we know, he's got really good acceleration. He's explosive. He fights for yards after the catch. He's physical. And that explosion, that acceleration, he seems to be able to do it in and out of cuts. He's not agile. He's not quick, but he can explode after cuts. How far can that take him? As far as his route running can take him. And that's the interesting thing with him is, the best comparison would be like a first-year Brandon Ayuk type guy. Mm-hmm. But, people hear me say that, they're like, what? Because he's got an argument for the best wide receiver in the league. But he's also become an incredible route runner. So, that it creates this thing. But if you get a guy with his skill set and, okay, is he going to become an average route runner consistently? A good route runner consistently? An elite one? But the ceiling is there for him to be a wide receiver 1. It just all depends on, okay, how far can you stack these traits? But the great thing is, give me a wide receiver 2 in round 2 all day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if this offense was legitimately Travis Kelce, two number 2 receivers, and whatever Kadarius Toney is, like that. If Skyy Moore was hitting those marks, we'd be looking at this offense very differently. So I remain optimistic about Rashee Rice being able to keep stacking those traits, but just the guy he is right now, I mean, imagine this offense where he just vanishes. Just imagine that Rashee Rice was never a part of this offense.
Man,
just everyone will just all sit in that for a second.
I mean, they really, that his development has been arguably the story. It's the story of the second half of the season. They know who they have in Mahomes, but I mean, Kelce, who is about to surpass 1,000 yards again, just clockwork that guy. But he also, he's 34, and asking him to be a 90% of the snaps guy. You could ask Kelce to be your number 1. You can. But asking him to do it literally every week at this point, I don't know. And that's only going to continue. And that's why you need to have someone else that at least forces, and like where we talk about, it's been 4 games in a row now. Now there's someone else that defenses will have to at least account for. That matters. And then how much they have to account for just depends on how much they can expand his role. That really is going to be the story of the second half of the season, is how far this goes. Because if let's say if he improves in the next 4 weeks, the way he has in the last 4 weeks, you're having a very different conversation about this Chiefs offense than you even are right now.
I'd love to be having that conversation. Let's have this conversation about the Chiefs defense while we're at it. Look, Bailey Zappi is the starting quarterback of the New England Patriots now. This Patriots offense stinks. The Chiefs will have 3 more matchups with backup quarterbacks, or at least guys who didn't start the season. Aiden O'Connell was a choice, but not the first choice in Vegas. And 3 more unlikely playoff teams, although the Bengals are still in the mix there as well. But the Chiefs defense in this game, they gave up 7 points. The final score was 27-17. The Chiefs defense gave up 1 actual touchdown drive. They got 1 missed field goal. If you want to, throw up the Pythagorean win-loss and say, all right, well, maybe they should have, quote unquote, given up 10 points. All right, fine. But they get the red zone stop to force the field goal, or at least the short yardage stop. I don't remember how close they actually got. 25 yards out. Yeah, red zone stop. And then the touchdown the Patriots score late that just is, Kadarius Toney. Is there anything that jumped out to you defensively in this game that is useful and noteworthy with where this team stands right now?
I don't know. Honestly, I didn't learn a ton about them. I would say that they were having some trouble hanging in man over the middle of the field early in the game. They were sending the house repeatedly. And Spags does this. We know this. We joke around about it. Sometimes it just destroys young quarterbacks. Sometimes it doesn't. And Zappi, what was interesting about him, he gets the ball out with confidence. Now, that's true whether he is throwing to the right guy or throwing to 3 Chiefs.
Yep.
And that was like that was it's kind of the interesting thing there, because I was like, watch, I was like, you know what, he's playing pretty well. Like that's the thing. Because good Lord, that was one of the worst picks I've seen in a minute. So I didn't learn a ton about them. They ended up they're more slow starters at this point in the season. It just seems like each game, I've just noticed early in games, the pass rush isn't getting home very quickly. And then it just, as the game wears along, not just like blitzing and that kind of stuff, but I started seeing a lot more of Chris Jones and Charles Omenihu and George Karlaftis kind of winning their reps. And it's just a fascinating thing to me, but that, I don't know. They've always been generally better to close games than to start games. So I just didn't really learn much about them in kind of a weird game. Game. And so I just don't know if there's really anything about them other than it was interesting to see them struggle in some man looks, given how good overall the secondary has been. And I think part of that is, for as good as L'Jarius Sneed has been this year, and he's been very good, there's been a lot of ado made about him following around number 1 wide receivers. And to an extent, he has done that. Not like people think about like Revis Island when they hear that. That is not how the modern NFL works at this point. If he's following them around, it's for like half the snaps and with some support. Like Darrelle Revis, and this is no disrespect to Sneed, it's just not how the NFL works anymore in terms of how you can defend people. And Revis was just different. He was just weird. he is not a pure, he's a good pure cover corner, but he's really reliant on his physicality. And once he's out in routes, he's an okay direct change of direction guy with good overall athleticism, but he doesn't have incredible hips like the way that you might see with McDuffie. And I think you saw that exploited a few times, a few other guys. And hey, McDuffie, who is an incredible cover corner, but doesn't always locate the ball the way he should. You saw that exploited too. So that was just, maybe that was like just like not even a yellow flag, like a white flag with a little bit of yellow in it. Just like, that's interesting at least.
Yeah, a white flag either means surrender or last lap. So I think we might have to pick a different color flag, but I understand where you're going here. We need like one of those maritime flags. It's like a white flag with like a yellow stripe through it, or a yellow checkerboard. Maybe I don't know. I've also lost.
Something to keep an eye on. And then and someone actually commented here, primetime gala. Let's say gala. I've heard it said both ways. I don't know what you want.
I didn't correct you, man. I didn't correct you.
So I Justin Reed and the safeties, they haven't been great covering tight ends. Reed has been decent to even very good covering tight ends in the past. I think he'll come around just like primetime things too. But the loss of Brian Cook, you could see it early on. And again, the team really recovered as a whole on defense. And late in the game, it was nice hearing the commentators talking about how much faster the Chiefs were playing, because they were playing so much faster. They were hitting hard. They were arriving well. But man, Brian Cook, I really hope that ankle sprain, my understanding is it looked horrific. My hope is maybe come playoffs, because he adds a lot of talent to that secondary in terms of athleticism, physicality, and the ability to play man coverage against tight ends out of the slot.
I'm going to go back to your Spags slow starter kind of thing first, because I hadn't even thought about this until you mentioned it all. But I think at some point last year, or maybe even the year before, we ended up having like a pretty good conversation. And I think Spags maybe even like asked about and talked about this in a presser, because the dude's just an open book and has the best pressers anywhere in football for my money. But we ended up having a little bit of a conversation about how Spags, as much as anybody, and I feel like offensive coaches usually get credit for this, but that Steve Spagnuolo is downright excited to start a game with, all right, I'm going to show you this and see what you do. Then I'm going to show you this and see what you do. And, ooh, you got us on that, so I'm going to show you this one and see what you do. And then in the second half, it's like, all right, thank you for the answers in the first half. We'll be using those from here on out. Appreciate it. Not even like, not baiting like, we're such a weak defense. We'll give you a free touchdown. It's not that, but it is setting up and evaluating and taking that info. And Mahomes even mentioned that post game.
Yep.
He said something along the lines of, he was asked about the defense and Willie Gay's pick and all of that. And he said something about how much the defense can change as they go and how much they're adjusting in real time. And again, we've talked about the other side of this. Actually making changes in games in real time, meaningful changes, is really hard. Like even at halftime, right? I mean, it's not, you don't just go and say, all right, we're going to kick into game plan 2 now, unless you've spent all week preparing for a first half game plan or a second half game plan or whatever. It's not,
right.
You don't get to call your half hour timeout and then, readjust your Madden depth chart. So anyway, all that to say, kind of interesting to remember that discussion in light of the kind of quote unquote slow starts these last couple of weeks that then are followed by stronger second halves from this defense. It makes me think that is, if not even by design, it's at least not a design flaw. I think that is something that they are doing kind of as a character trait at this point.
I would agree with that. I also think, and just on a note, Matt Derrick just tweeted out that Justin Ross has been removed from the exempt list. So that's going to be the
I should have mentioned that. That corresponds with Skyy Moore going to IR. I don't think that's why they made that move, probably, but Reed said this morning that he talked to Veach about the Justin Ross thing. So yeah, there you go. That makes a lot of sense.
And we could talk about that if you want. I don't really have a lot to say. I mean, like Ross wasn't playing much before. Yep. And so, I mean, we'll see. But so, in terms of a pure X perimeter guy, sure, he'd fit the bill if they trust him. But I mean, so we'll see. We'll see what next week holds. The snaps are certainly there for the taking if he's showing them what they want to see. So anyway, one thing that I think is worth at least noting with regards to that is I think teams are trying to figure out where the Chiefs might be a little bit weaker, especially with Drew Tranquill kind of coming back, Bolton still playing a little bit nicked up. They were running a lot of heavy, and the Chiefs had 3 linebackers on the field a ton. I think they were testing out the Chiefs linebacker personnel, like kind of rotation, because there were multiple snaps where Leo Chenal was on the field and Drew Tranquill was not, which is weird to me because Willie Gay can play all 3 linebacker spots. Nick Bolton can play Sam. He can. Drew Tranquill can play Will or Mike. Probably not really Sam because he's a smaller guy. I don't understand. I do like some of the things that Chenal does, but I think once they realized that they were throwing out of heavy, that's when you suddenly saw Tranquill come in. And I think it's teams are trying to figure out a way to, because the Chiefs have a really good secondary, a really well-coached secondary that communicates really well. I think they're trying to figure out how to get them into bad situations. And I think one thing that happened with the Patriots was you eventually run out of things you can do depending on what you've got with your 2 or 3 tight end sets. You eventually run out of things you can do if you're not running the ball really effectively. And I think that's part of what happened in the second half too, is the Chiefs just made some adjustments. They stopped just going blitz heavy and man coverage type stuff. Most tight ends can't get open against zone coverage nearly as effectively as Travis Kelce. And you just find answers. And so I think teams are going to keep kind of poking and prodding because the Chiefs nickel and dime sets have been really effective. And I think teams are going to keep trying to kind of poke and prod to see if they can keep them heavy. But in my opinion, with this linebacker group, although there's some flaws there, I think they can match up against almost any game plan, even one that's heavy. And that'll be really crucial moving forward in terms of them staying healthy.
The specific fun part about Drew Tranquill seems to be like, well, if he's out there and they start deciding to pass out of heavy, he's the guy that makes it hard to commit to that. He's the guy that makes it hard to say, we're going to run both these tight ends out and they're going to run some routes and figure like, no, we got Drew Tranquill. That's okay. We've got a Hulk. I mean, that's kind of, that seems like part of the appeal there. You said a phrase earlier also that for me, this might be kind of my last take before I let you see if there's anything else that we haven't covered that you think is meaningful. And I'm kind of leaving it that open-ended because, as you said earlier, I don't know that we learned that much in this game. From either side of the ball. And I think that might be a little bit of the holding pattern we're in the rest of the way. Again, it'll be interesting to see if the Bengals do anything different. And the Raiders made it kind of interesting and a little frustrating in the first matchup. So we'll see where these games actually go. I mean, again, they are teams with both, pride and future contracts to play for. And divisional rivals, I'm sure, would love to knock the Chiefs off. The Bengals, I'm sure, would love to knock the Chiefs off, and they're still trying to fight for a playoff spot. So we'll see what's going on with them in a couple of weeks. But by and large, this is a game of the 2023 Kansas City Chiefs to me. You have fine offensive performances in a few places. Clyde Edwards-Helaire outperforms expectations with Isaiah Pacheco out. Rashee Rice looks really good, but the offense still has issues with turnovers and not as many penalties, but at least one that they couldn't overcome. I guess they ended up settling off of the Rice penalty that shouldn't have been called and whatever. But you end up still in some of that just off a tick, air quotes, sort of thing.
Right.
Defensively, you hold up very well against a subpar offense, and you end up giving up more points than you should have because your offense actually let you down. And one of your receivers, maybe your most dynamic receiver, certainly I think second to Rice, does the exact same thing he did in week 1. A lot of this game, there was nothing new in this game on the season as a whole. The order that it was all stitched together in, that's one thing. But you could have Frankensteined this game with everything except for the name Bailey Zappi from a game earlier this season. And so I don't think that's good or bad. I just think it's kind of what it is. You hit sim week in Madden, and you're going to do it again a few more times before the playoffs. I'd love to see them answer some of those questions preemptively before they get to playoff football. I don't know if they will or not, but again, kind of an ugly win. Happy to have an ugly win after some ugly losses, but that's kind of my last point on where this game left me, I think.
Sure. I think something for people to at least continue to consider. And let me just be clear on what I am not saying before I say what I'm going to say. I am not saying that I think the Chiefs are going to tighten up these mistakes. I wrote 2 weeks ago, I think this is who they are. Now we'll see. Generally speaking, they've been much more put together in the playoffs the last 3 or 4 years, except the AFC Championship second half against Cincy. And honestly, Mahomes just played badly. Like that was Like, it really wasn't that complicated. He did not play well. And Hill and Kelsey both had terrible drops. So actually, no, that really was more of that. It was just self-inflicted wounds. I don't expect them to completely clean that up. What I do think is at least interesting from this game is that we saw a continued trend that we've seen over the course of the last like 3 to 4 weeks, where it's gone from the offense looking borderline unplayable to where it's an offense that's moving well until it does something stupid. And that's where, so they averaged 5.3 yards per play against a really good Patriots defense. And that is one thing that's at least worth noting. This is a really good Patriots defense, much, much better than the defenses they've been playing the last few weeks. And their performance was actually better overall. Still, stupid mistakes. I don't know if they're going to fix that. But it's just kind of interesting, you know, it would have been above the NFL average for yards per play against one of the better defenses in the league. And that's at least interesting. They're moving the ball again. I do think Clyde being somewhat useful overall, and again, he wasn't great. He's not an explosive runner, but him just kind of, I don't know why they're still running him these outside zone looks occasionally. And even he looks disinterested in it at this point. He's like, Andy, why are you doing this to me? You give him that gap stuff, north-south, he picks the gap, and you can tell he's running with more power than he was. You know, they list him at, someone made a "yeah in your bra" joke when they listed him at 205, which I don't know if that's still an okay joke to say. It was on Liar Liar, and so if Jim Carrey can say it, I'm sure it's fine. That's probably not a great standard to go by. Anyway, so he's probably running around at about 220 packed into like a 5'7" frame, which is impressive. And so that's at least.
Will you stand up and show everybody what that looks like?
Well, it looks real different from me, for one thing. It's all about where the weight is distributed, really. Oh, 220. Oh, to be 35 again. Anyway.
See, that was maybe one of the meaner jokes that I think I've let fly at your expense. And I thought you'd make it meaner to yourself, so I feel like it was okay.
Oh, yeah.
220, whatever, nothing to be ashamed of, I hope.
I'm not too worried about it at this point.
Yeah,
whatever.
Sense.
And so I do think that's at least interesting in that there is a little bit of, okay, you know, if we need to do some power running stuff, because Jet McKinnon, appreciate what he can do in pass protection and in the passing game. He is not a runner at this point overall. That's just not who he is. He doesn't have the same explosion he used to, and that dude weighs like $175 soaking wet. And so,
here's what that looks like.
Yeah. The Adonis of my co-host
brought it back around. Yeah, there we go.
And so, I mean, those are two kind of somewhat interesting things. But we already knew the offense was moving the ball before they did something stupid. And so now it's just kind of you see them continuing to narrow the receiver snap counts. You see them to kind of continue to tinker. Oh, okay, so we want Noah Gray out there 50-60% of the time. You see them narrowing towards something, and I'm at least intrigued. And the Rashee Rice thing, I'm intrigued. I just want to see them keep dialing up the volume with him. Although maybe what Andy Reid's telling us is like, hey, all you idiots think that a receiver needs to have all this incredibly well-rounded skill set to get 10 targets a game. Turns out you don't, and you can still just go out there and throw up, 80, 90 yards a game, apparently, if you've got the right skill set. So I'm excited to watch that continue because I feel like with the Raiders, seeing them the second time around, Lou Anarumo always has a good game plan against the Chiefs. I think we're coming up on some games now where we're going to see some specific Rashee type stuff. And then, okay, what can he do to counter that? What routes do you have him running that take advantage of teams just pressing him right at the line? Now, they already try to avoid that with a bunch of stacks and trips and that sort of thing. But what's the next phase then? And does Rashee continue to be a key component of that? Because that's the difference between a wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 1 is a wide receiver 2 can provide some really, really good games and step up when they're not the primary focus of the defense. How about when they are? Then what do you do? And I'm excited to see that develop.
I've got something you could do this weekend if you're out and about for the Christmas season. And also, of course, tonight, all on Sports Radio 810 WHB, the little flags over my shoulder, and, of course, ESPN Kansas City. Not even including Monday, but Thursday through next Monday over Christmas, the combo of 810 and ESPN Kansas City are going to have 10 NFL games on. Apparently, that's the most we've ever aired in a single week on 810 and ESPN Kansas City combined. So a ton of NFL action Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and of course, Christmas on Monday. We're going to have an absolute ton of NFL action, plus bowl season left and right. That's all over on your home for the NFL here in Kansas City, Sports Radio 810 WHB. Enjoy all of the NFL games you could possibly ever hope or want to find on the radio. They'll be on 810 this Christmas season. So enjoy that as we roll on and enjoy Monday Night Football tonight. We didn't get to talk about the other craziness around the rest of the AFC. We may do some of that on Thursday as we look ahead to Chiefs and Raiders, and the Christmas Day game on a Monday. We'll, of course, change our schedule in some way, shape, or form. We'll figure that out in the days to come, but expect to have the full crew back together with Nate returning from New England. Fingers crossed. It feels like every time that dude has to travel for a road game, there is just sort of some unplanned, unfortunate circumstance that belies him. So hopefully he'll make it back by Thursday, and we'll all talk then. But Seth, Nate's not here, so it means it's your chance to get us out of here.
Well, I've actually prepared a list of the 27 reasons why we are not Christmassy enough these days. No, I'm kidding. A lot of people are asking about.
Seth, sorry, was that list about why we're not Christmassy enough? Because hello.
No, that list actually has 77 items on it.
Oh, fantastic! Why don't you come over and nail them on my door?
Here's what I would say. I've had a lot of people ask about Travis Kelce's. This was kind of the first week that people were making a big deal out of it because he had a drop. Let me just say, Travis has dropped that before. I love Travis Kelce. He's an incredible player, but he has dropped remarkably similar throws to that a year ago, 2 years ago. He's got a couple of those in him. Remember the Colts game? He blamed himself for that loss 2 years ago. Maybe that was last year. I don't even remember anymore. So the idea that a route where he created a ton of separation, and honestly, the throw was a little late, is like proof that he's now getting washed. It's like maybe when he stops waxing guys and creating that kind of separation, because he still does, sure. You know what, Travis Kelce, he might be closer to retirement, because one thing I do note at every game, and I told Jazz this, and when we were live, I was like, watch what happens now. Because after he caught a pass and got tackled, it's like, watch what happens now. Yep, there he goes to the sideline, because you know what he is? He's 34. And he's like, that hurt. And as someone who fell on the ice earlier this week, and then, oh man, it was not great. And then when I was trying to get up, I put my hands on the ground and it was so slippery, my hand slipped and I came within a millimeter of just busting up my face. Kelce is still putting up dominant numbers. He is still an exceptional player. He's just old, guys. And that's what the Chiefs, he said he's going to play till the wheels fall off. So what they need to continue to do is, okay, how do we get his snap count? Keep it at that 70, 60%. And Rashee Rice, that's his job. And so he's not washed. He's just old, man. And speaking on behalf of old people everywhere, give us a break. Just takes us a minute. Just give me a minute. Like, things don't quite work the way they used to. Nothing does.
Well, Travis Kelce never felt pain or got old before Taylor Swift got involved. Taylor Swift got involved. All of a sudden, Travis